remarkably preserved.
Yeah.
It's an 11,000-year-old site, which has got a lot of organic matter still there. And I'm doing a 4-week online study of it. So I've just done a week, and it's via someone called, and I hope this is not a swear word for Carl, Professor Nikki Milner.
Oh, Nikki, you're doing it with Milner, are you? Oh, wicked.
Yes.
I didn't think she was still going. Right.
Well, finished in 2015 according to this, but she's the one who's doing the lectures online.
So she's actually teaching them now?
No, they're pre-recorded. It's an organisation called, hang on.
The CIA.
Future Learn.
Ah, nice.
Oh,
nice.
Future Learn, yeah.
Yeah, because I did the basic archaeology thing with them just before joining the group, and it was really good. So I saw this one and I thought, oh, I'll give that a go, because I'm sure we've done this last year.
We did.
But it's really interesting.
No, that's brilliant. You're actually connecting.
Really interesting.
You're connecting with other people. That's great. Anne, any news from you this week? Anne with the E.
Oh well, I just did watch that man again last night. Alan Young, is it, or Alan someone? He's an archaeologist, but he did do quite a kind of history of archaeology, you know, and showed us just some places, you know, places that he went from. Oh God, I can't remember now. He did. He was so impressive. He talked about, well, he went to Herculaneum first, and he talked about Algraveri.
Oh, right.
Anyway, and then Belzoni.
Belzoni, Giovanni Battista Belzoni, right, yeah.
And he went to Palenque.
Actually, I was teaching Palenque yesterday afternoon, so yeah.
Oh, well, he went to Palenque. It was nice to see it, because you have taught it before.
That's right, we're doing Palenque yesterday.
Troy, and all about Pitt Rivers. It was
nice.
Very interesting.
And the museum, yes. Your daughter and I.
Well, no, he didn't mention the museum. He just talked about Pitt Rivers and Cranbourne Chase.
Chase.
Yeah, where he did all his like experiments and things. So it was a good, you know, add-on to what you've already taught us. You know,
that's good.
Yeah,
that's good. That's good. Well, thanks for that. Well, there's a lot out there to watch, and without the E.
No, I've done nothing. I've been very idle this week.
You can't be idle, you know. It's just like
I think this being shot in makes me feel less. I don't know, less enthusiastic about anything.
Don't be like that. What about Billy Idol, Henry?
I sent you an email about some chap who decided to be dug up in Gloucestershire, Bronze Age chieftain found with his shaman.
I read that. How strange. Yeah, but I got that. The Daily Mail. So what we've got, did ancient Britons commit human sacrifice in Gloucester? Bronze Age chieftain is found alongside shaman who may have been killed to accompany him into the afterlife. The burial site was discovered in the Market Sound in Gloucestershire. A chieftain was buried with 4 cowhide rugs and a selection of valuable goods, including a picture of Lloyd George. He was buried 4,000 years ago and was an important Beaker culture leader. The shaman was found buried facing the chieftain and was in the seated position. Archaeologists believe the 50 to 60-year-old shaman may have been a human sacrifice to help guide the chieftain on his journey through the afterlife. Yeah, I read through that, and I'm probably of the point of view that the shaman probably died about the same time, but that could be something else. Yeah, nice article. And talking about articles of the week, I've got a load of articles of the week here as well. So thanks for that, Henry.
Okay.
What about you, Pat? Wasn't it that lady last night who joined us on the archaeology and history? She was from California.
California, wow. Okay.
So I asked her if she knew you, if she'd come across you. You know, she said she hadn't come across Pat Cameron, but she had met a Pat who might be related to you. So, you know. So no news, Pat?
No, something about coins being discovered somewhere. Did you?
Is it that one?
Could be. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Let's go for that.
We'll go for that one. Okay, we'll do that one. And Alice, you're a bit late joining us today. Is it to do? We had problems getting the emails out. To be honest with you, any problems?
No, I just a wee hiccup getting online, but I'm on now, so I'm glad.
Alice, it's great to have you on board. You know, it's good to hear that Scottish accent.
Yes, it is.
Right. So, anything to say, Alice?
No, it's been rather a quiet week.
Oh, right. That's life. That's life.
Yeah.
So I would like to mention that next week we'll be doing the archaeology of a Welsh princess and a Welsh king. And we'll be we're thinking about starting a short class now and again, the backgrounds of swear words throughout history. I know Dell will want to do that one. And obviously, I think, Pat, you know this thing about calling Dorothy?
Oh, yes.
Were you going to do it or was I?
Well, I was hoping you would.
I've called her.
What?
What about? I've called her. Look.
Right, Anne, we're meant to call her about coming on today. So I'll just it was the idea that maybe
She could listen in.
Yeah, maybe she could feel included.
I was gonna phone her and put her online, like on my phone.
Why don't you? Yeah, well, go on then.
Oh.
Hang on. Hello. Hello. There's something wrong with my speaker, Anne, so you're going to have to probably do it. So if you give her a ring, that would be great. Tell you what, give her a ring and I'll get started so she can hear me whilst on your speaker. Tell her I just tried to call her.
I don't think she wants to.
So, okay.
The problem is we've gone and sent her books into the community, her maps. And
right, we're going to start now. What
happened there?
We're going to get started.
Right, good.
What the hell? What's that? What was that about maps? Right, okay. Right, let's get started. Right. So I'm going to have Alice to join me today.
Okay.
Because Dell, I'm always using Dell, right? And you're the other one going to join me. Right, okay. So we're going to get started. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off with a bit of an image behind us. And we'll just get that image with us now. And just give me a second and we'll get started. Bingo. And you should be seeing something now. Share screen.
Not yet.
Right, what are you seeing on the screen, lovelies?
A little map.
Are you seeing a little map, Alice?
A little map.
A little map is good. Right.
Yeah, it's bigger now.
Okay, what else are you seeing on the screen? Anything else?
Names of places.
Good. Right. Well, not names of places. I think George Harrison isn't the name of a place, but anyway.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, the main thing is that we've got it puts Lindo Man into the context. It's sort of a silly little spoof of where historical figures were born, like Thora Hird. But anyway, Lindo Man is from this area, Cheshire, and this is your to see if you're actually seeing detail. So we're going to be visiting number 3, and we've got our 2 Irish examples found in 2003, and we've got examples found in the Netherlands. Quite a number of examples have been found in the Netherlands. We've got a number of examples that have been found in Denmark and Germany. Altogether, we've got 1,000 examples of bog bodies found across Europe, which is quite a lot. But they've been found from the 1600s onwards. So today is going to be more of an adventure with a lot of text. So if you don't mind, that's where we're going to go. So there he is. Now, I don't know if any of you can remember back to 1985 when they did an episode of QED. Can you remember that, Anne?
No.
It was a BBC, 10 million people watched a QED episode in 1985 about Pete Marsh, otherwise known as Pete the Bog, or Pete of the Bog, depending on which newspaper headlines you actually read. And this character has been a very rather interesting character from day one. We know quite a lot about him, and we know, if we compare him with Otzi the Iceman, is that there's been a lot of extensive research associated with this individual. Compare this individual with the work that was done at St. Bees, you'll realize that my criticism of the archaeologists working at St. Bees is quite warranted from 1981. They did such a bad job with the medieval body, and this body that they found in Cheshire on the 1st of August, 1984, they've done a very good job. They've even freeze-dried him. So, you know, I'm not too sure I agree with him being on display all the time, but the body is there for people to look at and to be able to understand, and so on and so on. So, I would like us to start off with other examples of bog bodies, and Anne and Henry mentioned the two in Ireland. There's been a few found in Ireland. Thank you for that, Del and Henry. And just to sort of give you a few background bits of information, and obviously with my image, can you actually see me on screen still?
Yes.
Good. And what you can see behind me is actually Pete Marsh. We've actually got a green screen. We've invested in a green screen. So this green screen itself is assists me to have one or two things in the background which I haven't done before. This is the landscape of Lindo Moss. Now, there will be things repeated a lot today because I'm trying to get a few things into your minds. But to start off with, the landscape of Lindo Moss, Cheshire Way, Northern Cheshire, is a landscape that was once a large inland lake of around 1,500 acres. It was formed after the last ice age. And the reason why I was going to say 150 is about 150 acres of the moss left today, which isn't a lot really, because there's 1,500. And that entire landscape was once covered in peat. If anyone finds any human remains now, there'll be one or two little bits and bobs in the outside area, outside that 150 acres. And there'll just be little bits of bone here and there, because usually what happens, due to the process of the rotting down of this Magnum moss, it likes to eat away at the bone structure, the calcium in the bone. And anyone with any bone disorders like myself with scoliosis and so on, will know that our bone structures are not as good as everybody else's. But we'll go into that process in a short while. So the landscape of Lindo Moss in front of us, a nice little drainage ditch there, obviously shows that it's still a little bit damp peat-wise, but again, lots of information to look at. And this is them, the archaeologists, removing some of the blocks of peat from Lindo Moss in 1984. Unlike the excavations of St. Bees, they respected any of the human remains that have been found at Lindo Moss. And there he is. There he is. However, before we actually go into great detail about Lindo Man, we've got to look at Lindo Woman. And there's a rather interesting story associated with Lindo Woman. But before we look at Lindo Woman, we need to look at some other information to do with other bog bodies. And I rather think that that man is wearing gloves. It's 1984. They're trying to get samples out, and probably my feeling is that this is a little bit of a repeat of what they did at St. Bees. It's not actually a repeat of what they did at St. Bees, actually. They did show this body a great deal of respect. And if you do see there, they've got a bit of an endoscope that they're trying to get in there to actually have a little bit of a look. It's something that they didn't actually do on any level with St. Bees. I really wish that woman in the background could have a big slap across her face, because she needs a face mask on for a start. And with a look of disgust on her face, is not really much of a professional. But that's me saying that. I saw this body displayed in the British Museum when I went there on a school trip back in the 1980s. And I actually, they actually had to send a security guard in to actually get me out the museum, because I was so interested in looking at this body, because I'd only heard of it being discovered a few years earlier. And that is what these bodies eventually look like after a great deal of time in the moss. When we actually talk about this body, what we need to do, this is why it's good, the body was face down in the peat. But for us to actually understand what's going on, this is how he's displayed today. Occasionally goes up to Manchester. So that's a rather interesting thing. And if we want to sort of go a little bit further forward, I need to stop my screen share. And what we're going to do is, obviously, we're gonna look at a nice little article, which I need to get up on my screen a minute. So a little bit of a delay. And this next thing is entitled "Noteworthy Bog Bodies." It's a type of book you go to sleep with. So here we go. Let's do a little bit of screen sharing. I'm going to be a moment. And there we go. Bingo. So what can you see on the screen now, Alice?
Noteworthy bog bodies and what they tell us.
That couldn't have even been better said by anybody else. So typical sort of peat bog, lots of rushes, lots of reeds, lots of grasses. Peat bogs are very enigmatic places. You can imagine if it's night time, you see a bit of will-o'-the-wisp, you head into the bog, you don't come out. So noteworthy bog bodies, nice title. So I would like to maybe ask what Anne's interpretation is just a short sentence. Anne, when I say a bog body, what are we talking about?
A body that's been preserved in the bog may have been put there deliberately.
Or accidentally? No, that's good. Alice, anything else you want to say?
No, she just said what I was going to say.
I usually get this in classes, you know. I get 10 people in a room and everyone says, I was just about to say what that person was going to say. So what I wanted to do, it was a really bad idea just to look at peat marsh today. It's good to put this in context. So that bog there is what the mire, the marsh at Lindo Moss used to look like, completely, all 1,500 acres. An acre is basically the size of a football pitch. Lots of these bodies come from the Netherlands. It goes dredged out of the past and hinting at violent mysteries. Bog bodies intrigue and haunt us. When you look at bog bodies, we're not always talking about that lots of these people had violent deaths. And also, in lots of ways, a bog body might represent somebody who's already died and that's been ritualistically strangled after death, stabbed after death, punched after death, parts of their guts ripped open after death. And I'm going to actually say something really unusual to you all in a short while after we've done the first little information about the next bog body that we're going to come across. What we know that they exist within cold water swamps are excellent preservers of human bodies. Tick there, and The oxygen-free environment prevents decay, and the excessive tannins, naturally occurring chemicals used in tanning leather, preserve organic materials such as bodies, including soft tissues and the contents of the dietary tract, but not, in lots of cases, the bone, but in lots of the cases, the skull. Rather interesting that. So we're going to go on to that. I just got to remind myself with a big underline that we've got to mention that one. But why were they there? And why did so many die violently? I think that's a good sentence. And why did so many die violently, but not all of them? Yeti girl, a beautiful girl. She was found with golden hair. When I say golden hair, it was red hair. Now, most of the bodies that have been found across Europe, as far as the Canary, well, not really at the Canary Islands, because that's a different type of preserved body, but those bog bodies across Europe, sort of from France, Netherlands, Germany, and going all the way up to Lindo Moss and looking at South Uist and the Callan Hallan bodies. Lots of them show signs of having red hair, but actually that wasn't their original hair color when they died. Because what happens with the smagnan, which is the active acids associated with the smagnon, mosses as they break down, and all the other acids sort of turn the hair color red, right? So that's one thing. And one rather interesting thing about lots of these bog bodies is that the Germans used these bog bodies as evidence of you know, a pure superior race. And when Heinrich Himmler established the Ahnenerbe, which is the SS Archaeological Division, amazingly enough, on the 1st of July 1935, they went out to look at these bog bodies to prove that there had been the pure Aryan superior race in Europe 10,000 years ago. Looking at all these bodies, they found lots of them having red hair, and lots of them having light hair, or whatever they want to describe how they're mutating history. And they use bog bodies as sections of evidence for them to prove that there is this pure Aryan race in the past, and that the Aryan race has really old origins, and they cited lots of these bog bodies as that evidence. But there's a little bit more to it than that. And let's look at this girl, and I'm going to say something that might actually alarm you. But before we do that, let's look at some of the facts. This is Yedda, or Yedi girl, found in the Netherlands in 1897. She was aged about 16. The date range is a bit queer. So if you take the middle of 170 BC to 230 years AD, around the middle, roughly around the birth of Christ, around that time she died. The DNA evidence has been contaminated not only by the length of over 100 years that the body's been out of the ground, but also by the acids. DNA doesn't really survive as well associated with bodies in peat bogs. And the manner of death, strangulation, that may have killed her. There was found a wooden band remains around her throat. She was also stabbed in her right clavicle. So she's got a stab wound as well. And a CT scan revealed that she suffered from scoliosis. She had an irregular gait, and she was buried in a very fine, large woolen cloak. Now, I'm going to say something. I've been involved in archaeology for a long time to realize what I'm about to say is not the norm. Now, my grandmother passed away last year in April, and I was really upset that I didn't see her. I was meant to go and see her in hospital hours before she died, and for reasons I didn't get there. I was very angry. I was very angry with my nan that she didn't hang on a little bit longer. I was very angry with myself. I was very upset. And people's level of being upset in the past, and I know this sounds strange, may have been after the person has died to ritualistically hang them. If you're very angry with somebody that they've died and left you alone, you might want to stab them. If say, for example, they've died and you've loved them very dearly and you feel that they've left you, you might club them on the back of the head after they've died. Now, these things you might not feel are appropriate for me saying, right? But there is lots of evidence saying that lots of these wounds on these bodies were done after the person died, and why maybe something of what I've said is actually accurate, because what we do know is that there's lots of evidence in the past where when people were angry or when people wanted to mourn somebody, as examples in Orkney, they're working on this evidence in mainland Orkney, where people would go underground into the souterrains underground, and there would be little panels between the stonework underground into the mud, and people would scream and get very angry, and they would scream into the holes, you know, I'm really angry that somebody died. Why did they leave me? And then, and this is what the present focus of archaeology is, going into different areas, why we find these wounds on these bodies, why we find damage, and maybe within ourselves, even though we wouldn't want to hit somebody or punch somebody who's already dead, because in today's society, it's great. Somebody can pass away and you can mourn for a whole year. You can be supported by the state. You can take time off work and all these other things. These people didn't have that opportunity. The only way they had to mourn somebody was there and then, before they're placed into the ground. And maybe stabbing somebody who's already dead to take your anger out on them and then mourn is probably the only way you can deal with it. And Alice, how do you feel about what I've just said?
It doesn't come as no surprise to me, but personally, I wouldn't have done it. No.
But we're not talking about today. We're talking about the past.
No. Yeah.
What you're doing is you're putting your modern perception.
My view on it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're going to do now, we're going to move down. This is a rather interesting one, right? There's two bodies. They were found, known as the Wodingi men. I'll call them the Wodingles. The Wodingi men, found in 1904 at Brodtanga Moss in the Netherlands. There was two males found. They originally thought that the male and the lesser of the two was a female, in a bit of an embrace. So you've got the man and his arm lies under the slighter figure, the smaller figure. And initially, people actually thought that this was actually a loving couple until 1935. But before that, they found that there was an intestinal wound. That the bigger of the figure had obviously had their sides sliced and the intestines allowed to pour out. And there's a lot to be said about that. I could interpret that myself, but I think you've had a bit too much interpretation for me today. So, but the rather interesting thing is that seemingly tender positions of these figures in an embrace, they were called Mr. and Mrs. Venstra, Mr. and Mrs. Piet in Dutch. But later on, after 1935, it was realized that, in fact, these two were male. And then the Alan start to interpret these bodies from the Netherlands. They actually said that, in fact, homosexuality was not acceptable in the past. It's not acceptable in Nazi Germany. This is evidence to say that gay people should be exterminated. And this is used as evidence. The archaeology is used wrongfully as evidence to send homosexuals into the gas chambers. This was actually cited in Reinhard Heydrich's meeting to decide the final solution. So archaeological evidence is being distorted because they wanted proof to get rid of the homosexual population in Germany. The only way they could do that was to say that it happened in the Iron Age. They used to execute people in the Iron Age. But the evidence is very different. It's more likely that these two people weren't punished. There's very little other ancillary damage to the bodies. And these may have been two people who may have been ill, died at the same time. They may have actually been a father and a son. See where the interpretation's gone wrong there. And therefore, when you wrongly interpret archaeology, when you make a bigger picture than it should be, what it is, there's two individuals lying in a peat bog. One has a gash in their side. How do you interpret that? That's where we should be going. It's not Mr. and Mrs. and these are not homosexuals. Even if they were gay, so what? No, we could put another interpretation on it there. Homosexuality was something that happened in the past and it was accepted. I've just turned the whole thing around. So here we go. Lindo Woman. Lindo Woman was found in 1938. She was found in Denmark. Rather interestingly enough, believed to have been about 25 years of age, and being also found in a bog. A rope made of skin was found with the body, and there was clearly visible furrow marks around her neck. Now, it's noteworthy that her finely braided pigtail and her cloak, sewn with fine thread, a piece of cloak was wrapped around her feet. Although she was found 12 years earlier, her body was located only 100 meters away, well, under 100 meters away, from Tollan Man. Now, this furrow around her neck, rather interesting, all of this. And the furrow around her neck might be that she may have tightened that rope around the neck throughout life. Maybe that's a sign that she was hung after death. Actually, you know, a year's something, right? In America, if a slave had hit an owner, and then a slave took their own life, the slave would still be hung even though they're dead. Now, that's not from the Iron Age evidence. That's written evidence from only less than 300 years ago. So, you know, that's somebody who's being hung after death. So, you know, not all of these people suffered before they went into the bog. Maybe they voluntarily gave themselves to be hung. Maybe they were already dead. Maybe they died of something. You can't always presume that we know everything about these people. We were not there. This is why then these bog bodies have another face of their own, have another interpretation of their own. Now, this is rather interesting. A body found in 1941, about 25 years old, again found in Denmark, dating to 10,000 years ago. Let's do that again. A bog body that's 10,000 years old. Whoa, that's how long honey lasts in a jar, actually. And that's true. Honey can last a very long time in a jar, actually. We've got evidence for that. But this body itself is over 10,000 years old. You've got to write that down. 10,000 years old. That's a long time ago, and it's been in a bog for that length of time. Absolutely amazing. And it's the oldest of all the bog bodies. Only a skull and several bones are found, but no signs of violence. Now, the skull bit is rather interesting because there's a little bit of information at the back of your minds that you're thinking, well, if the Magnum is eating away at the bones, why does the skull survive and all the other bones usually dissolve? We'll come on to that very shortly. He was thought to be a woman until 2016. Turned out to be a man. Now, here we go. Wait for this image. Slowly. Tollan Man. What is your reaction to that face, Alice?
I haven't got one, actually. No.
Okay, Anne?
Looks like, I mean, it could be a modern sculpture, couldn't it? It's perfect. It's amazing.
Now that actually both,
in a bog.
yes, both the skin has been darkened by the tannin, and it's also been darkened by the smagnon. So it's almost as if the body's naturally been preserved, but it's turned tea-like color, and it's basically It's darkened in color. We'll get the original color in another slide coming up. But there's rather something interesting. I don't know if any of you have ever been to St. Fagans when they've got activity days. Well, I had a bit of a shock with Michelle and her 2 children once. And I think my daughter was with me as well. We went to St. Fagans, and there was a building at St. Fagans, and this woman was treating skins. And we thought she had basically a round thing in her hand. And she said, "Do you know what this is in my hand?" And I said, looks like it's a bit of wax. And she said, "No, that's the brain of a shrew." So she took her thumb and she started, put her thumb in it, right? Started grinding the shrew's brain down into a paste, not in a pestle and mortar. It has to be done this way, right? And she said, "That there, I will use to treat that skin over there that's come from a shrew." The brain itself has got the oils in it that's required to treat a skin. So in other words, if you need to treat a human skin, i.e., you need to take the brain out of the human being, and you need to use the brain itself and the oils, the natural oils, to treat that skin. Yeah? Now, the question was, we've only got 1 live class I teach. There's only 1 person turns up, actually, which is within government allowances. And when I'm teaching this, the big question Mike was saying was that, why is the skull surviving? Why can you almost perfectly see the skull? We couldn't work it out. And then the answer came up on Tuesday, and we thought, right, the reason why the skull is surviving and not being eaten away by the smagnon, the acid, the smagnon itself from the smagnon moss, is because the oil itself is almost as if it's being absorbed into the bone, and it's acting as some kind of a barrier to therefore preserve the superstructure to have this sort of substructure of the skin over it. And that was a really nice answer. So Tollan Man, he was found in 1950, age around 30 to 40. If you want to give a middle date there, roughly 2,000 years ago, about birth of Christ again. Lots of these bodies seem to be around that time. The reason why we got varying dates here is 1950 is 1 year before radiocarbon dating by Willard Libby was actually invented to actually date bodies a lot better. And what they've done is they've taken some of the modern sample and carbon dated it to give you a rougher date, but it's very difficult to do that with bog bodies. Here we go. Near Lindo Woman that we've mentioned. Manner of death, hanging. Okay. But they later found out it was death caused by suffocation, not by the combination of suffocation and a broken neck. So in other words, it's likely that the person was suffocated before death. And to be honest with you, I'm told that the best way of committing suicide is to drown. It's nice and quick, and it's over and done with quickly. So who's to say this person was deliberately drowned or suffocated? Or in fact, the person, there's lots of ways the person could have died outside the archaeological explanation. He has the most well-preserved body of all bog bodies, and we'll have a look at that towards the end. Only his arms and hands are like those of a skeleton, because what happened, that was sort of lying in an area of the bog that was that still had oxygen and still had bacteria in it. His hands and his arms were probably sticking out of the bog, and they rotted down. But the rest of his body was almost perfect. Now, this is interesting. Person writing this said about the clothing disintegrated, or he was buried wearing only a pointed cap made of sheepskin and an oxide belt. That takes me to something earlier on. All the evidence I can see is most of the bodies are found in these bogs without any clothes. And if they've got clothes, they've got one or two little items like a belt. I don't believe that the clothing, in most cases, rotted down at all. They went into the bog naked. And if you're trying to if you're trying to bloodlet somebody who's still alive or they're dead, the best way of doing that is to have a body that's naked. The naked form is the most natural form of the human body. It's gonna be preserved better. That's key. A naked body is going to be preserved better. So if these people knew anything about preserving a body, right, they would know that preserving a body naked in a bog is the best way to do it. We know the archaeological evidence from the bodies at KARL-JAMES, South US, is that we're talking about over 2,000 years ago. The bodies were placed in a bog near KARL-JAMES, and it seemingly that after a while they were taken out of a bog, placed into the homes of people, placed into the corner, and natural mummification. People could talk to them. And this is basically, we've got lots of evidence of mummification. Look at this one here, Tollan Man. Obviously, we've explained the redness of the hair.
Mhm.
And I got to be honest with you, Alice, what's your first impression?
It's well preserved. Yeah.
And you, Anne? Oh, no, Anne.
There's something that almost to have expression, the last two. They're so well preserved. You feel you could almost talk to them.
And actually, go on.
I don't know. Was he found on his side like this? Because he looks rested.
Yeah, they do look rested. They all look rested. When we look at Tollan Man, one of the last images we see today, you'll be able to get your answer to that one. It's almost as if some rested on their faces, some rested on their sides or in a crouched position. Tollan Man as well is a very good example of somebody who looks very much as if they've rested. And moving on a little bit more, Tollan Man, very well preserved from 1952. And this then makes me angry again about the body from St. Bede's. Archaeologists were able to preserve human remains in 1952. So why was the medieval knight of St. Bede so appallingly treated? That's a really good preserved body, I really got to say. And this is found, so we've got this one being found in Denmark. Again, another look at the face. Okay. And very good preservation. Again, the point I was just making, which keeps coming back into my mind and out, so I'll say it now. When you think about, if you temporarily preserve the body in a bog, right, and you took it out the bog and you put this body in your house, if you've got faces like this and you've got them in the corner, right, it's no wonder people kept the mummies with them inside their homes. In the space of KARL-JAMES for hundreds of years, generation after generation. And I know this is, if any of you ever seen the film Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they talk about, I know it's fictitious, but some say it's based on some fact, but it's a film. But the point made is that the people who research these films base their stuff on something. And if you mummify somebody the right way, you can keep them in a house with you for a very long time. There's been cases over recent years where people have lost a loved one. They've mummified them and kept them in the house for decades. This individual had their throat slit from ear to ear, right? And that's a rather interesting process. It's to have your throat slit from ear to ear, right? That's got a very deep meaning. And the deep meaning is that you're being bloodlet. Your blood is seen to be holy, maybe. Looking at what this says here, his hands and feet are very well preserved, as his face. He remains one of the most examined bog bodies and is believed to have been a sacrifice to the fertility goddess after a bad harvest. Is that fact or fiction? The one thing that I always say about my fellow archaeologists is that when archaeologists don't have an explanation, they always bring in gods and ritual and things like that. To be honest with you, there is such a thing about mourning somebody. There is something a lot greater than gods and goddesses, but I'm putting my own take on that, but we don't really know how these people think. We're going to look at Lindo Man in a lot more detail. 1984, 25 years old, radiocarbon dating, maybe taking this body somewhere around 100 years AD, over 1,900 years ago. We know, we'll look at this in, as I say, we've got, he's been struck more than twice on the head. He's been garroted, and he's had his jugular vein severed. Again, another vein being severed, a jugular vein is being severed. So you're being naturally bloodlet. Your blood is holy. The blood is a holy thing. Blood is a holy thing today. Do you know, actually, when you give blood in a hospital, or when you're given a blood transfusion, you can then understand how holy blood is. And this is why they saw blood as being very important in the past, as Central Americans have seen blood to be very important. Pete Marsh, he's been x-rayed, radiology. And when he was originally found, this was after a body had been found on Lindo Moss only a year earlier. And the body, it was once thought to be modern because he was so well preserved, but then it was realized that there was no teeth fillings. All of us have tooth fillings, and those tooth fillings indicate that you're modern. If you've got no tooth fillings, you've probably been born probably before about 1960 odd. I know there are fillings going on before the 1960s, but most people are not having any fillings being placed in until a little bit later. He's been well-groomed hair, a trimmed beard with shears and fingernails, but that gives you a little bit more content. Old Tollan Man in County Offaly. That's just for Henri. So this body probably dates from around 200 years BC, a lot earlier than these others. Found in 2003, again from his early 20s. Somebody asked me today, they asked the question, Karl, is all this evidence that there's some kind of a cult around Europe where people are being placed into bogs for whatever reasons? And then my answer is, maybe, but probably not. It's probably a thing that's done in different communities, i.e. people start making pottery in Barry, and they might start producing pottery in Arnside at the same time, but there's no link between the two villages. They've decided to make pottery. They decided to put people into peat bogs because naturally there's natural light. There's the will-o'-the-wisp at night time. There's a weird smell about them, and weird animals hang around them. Why not put your loved ones into these peat bogs? So the manner of death is with this wonderful thing, one in Ireland, one of two we're going to briefly look at. The one at Cragan Horat, top of the world here. This one, basically strangulation, stabbing, and had holes cut in his arms through which wreaths of twisted hazel were threaded. Now, I really like this one. Now, self-mutilation. Why do we do self-mutilation today, Alice?
Because you're in pain and it's a release.
And another reason, why do you have your ears pierced?
Beauty.
Bingo! Self-mutilation is not necessarily a negative thing altogether. And, you know, we're looking at this in a different way. You know, when you go to Africa, people have these golden rings around their neck and they have these really long necks. That's self-mutilation. And what they do to some women in societies in Africa, that's self-mutilation as well. There's different ways of looking at all this. A Jewish man, he's self-mutilated as well. Obviously, it's done by somebody else, but it's classed as self-mutilation. So what we see as well about this Tollan Man is he's got fingernails seem to have been manicured. He wore a leather armband and a bronze amulet, closely related to Tollan Man, And rather interesting, I liked this one when I read it. And we might get a little bit graphic in a moment, but both of them had their nipples cut off because it was believed in Ireland that sucking a king's nipples was a gesture of your submission to the king and leaders of Ireland. And a man might suck a female's nipples, and a woman might suck a man's nipples because it's a sign of affection, and is a very, very powerful sign of affection. And these individuals have had their nipples cut off. The brutal removal of nipples might indicate that these two individuals may have been failed figures in society, or that they naturally passed away. And by cutting their nipples off is a sign of passage, because the next leader, then you need to suckle their nipples. And, you know, there's different interpretations, again, found in 2003. In their early 20s, this one, around a little bit earlier than the other one, if you want to go by these dates, maybe a mean average date is around 250 years BC there, or maybe they're around the same time. This person's been stabbed, strangled, stabbed, struck on the head 3 times, and on the chest once with an axe, and then been disemboweled. Nice. But I don't think we're talking about the same thing as hung, drawing, and quartering. Triple killed. Triple killed. Well, what that means is when you're triple killed, you're being seen as a sacrifice. Maybe you're you can't you can't basically be strangled, stabbed, struck on the head 3 times, and disemboweled whilst you're still alive. It just this isn't hung, drawing, and quartering, folks. This is overkill. Bingo. That's a nice word, an overkill. Maybe that's where that term comes from. So overkill, killed, ceremoniously killed 3 times. Triple killed to represent fertility, sovereignty, war, and death, all associated with the goddess or the god. But when in the form of the goddess, fertility, maybe you might, that might be indicated by strangulation. I don't know how. Being stabbed is sovereignty. You might stab somebody as a sense of, you know, acknowledgement, and disemboweled equaling war or death. Different ways of interpreting this. And the wonderful individual at Tollan Man is seen to have had hair that had product placed on it, i.e. plant oil and pine resin ingredients that have been added to the hair. So what we're going to do now, so we're gonna, I do believe that Anne wants to say something. So go on, Anne.
I'd like to ask a question. It's something I was thinking about yesterday, that on 2 or 3 of these bodies that you've shown us, you mentioned about sacrifice to gods or
goddesses,
failure or something like that. Is there any evidence about how they choose the sacrifices? Would they be weaker members or people not thought much of? I mean, they wouldn't be sacrificing kings, would they? But is there any evidence of how they would choose a sacrifice anywhere?
Do you know, I've got a big grin on my face. And why have I got a big grin on face? Sometimes when you do lectures like this, everyone seems to be pushed into the direction that you want them to be pushed into. Because the point I'm going to make now is that when I went to, it's known as the Tomb of the Eagles, on South Ronaldsley on Orkney. And when you go to the Tomb of the Eagles, the first thing that you do, you go into a little museum, and the lady says, look at these skulls. And you think there's something strange about these skulls. They're all deformed. The humerus and the femurs are deformed and stuff. And there's 36 of them. And lots of these have grown into their teenage or whatever, but they're severely disabled. 36 of them. And they're placed into a tomb at the Tomb of the Eagles. And this tomb at the Tomb of the Eagles, they've placed in sea eagle claws, talons in there, right? They put the talons in there along with these bodies. So they revered these individuals. And we know they revered them because there's only ill people with bad bone structures being placed into them, right? Now, if you want to use that as your evidence to say that these are people with disabilities like Yada girl who had scoliosis, right? She was 16. She may have been in a lot of pain. And she said, I'm in a lot of pain. I want to be sacrificed for a reason. Who are we? How dare any of us judge those people who put those bodies in the Andes of children, right? When I've seen it time and time again. Oh, people, those young children, they've been sacrificed to the gods in the deep high Andes, right? They've taken a potion or something and they've been sacrificed and all the rest of it. How do people know that the children didn't want to be sacrificed? How do you know the children weren't ill? How do you know the children weren't already dying when that happened?
Yeah, necessarily, because some people might, because of their great reverence, offer to save the tribe or something by doing it. I don't know. There can be all sorts of reasons why, but I wondered if there was any evidence how they chose. I wasn't making an assumption.
No. We've expanded on what you've said. When you haven't made an assumption at all, we've expanded on what you've just said. It's the same, for example, as you got the First World War as a metaphor. My great granddad Albert Williams was a sergeant in the First World War. We've heard cases of him leading his troops into battle. If he had been killed, he's sacrificing himself to lead his men, right? There's no difference in any of this. So how dare we presume that these people are always murdered? How dare we put our own take on this? And Anne wants to say something and then we'll carry on a little bit. Go on, the other Anne.
It's just, well, sacrifice is a very important part of their day-to-day living, isn't it? Because it's how you gain, you gain favour with the gods.
Animal sacrifice and children sacrifice and adults. There's all sorts of other things, isn't there?
Yeah.
Interesting. Quite how these. I mean, I don't deny the thought that, and the religions are always incomprehensible to us. Interesting how people do get selected or decide to or whatever.
Yeah. So in other words, we've got different ways of looking at it. It's really important to have an open mind with these bog bodies. So what I'm going to do, today's lecture in Lantwick Major went on for 2.5 hours. I've got to crack on and then we'll take a break. Because I know Henry's got to have his dinner. And his missus is waiting downstairs with his with a plate full of food. So there you go. So we're not going to screen share now. I'm gonna look at some text. I want to give a bit more science now. I've mentioned lots of little bits of thing about bones and stagnum moss and stagnum liquid. European peat bogs happen to be excellent at preserving organic matter, bits of animal skin, bits of human skin that are almost vellum-like in their preservation. These can last for thousands of years, as we know with the one example that has been in the ground for 10,000 years. So what happens? Basically all those fine mosses, the sphagnum moss itself, is that big thick layer that forms on lots of these peat bogs. In a way that stops any oxygen going below. And the sphagnum, so you've got sphagnum and the sphagnum is the actual liquid produced from the rotting sphagnum moss. And that itself absorbs oxygen, absorbs various nitrogens and microbes and so on, and it also eats away at the calcium, but it doesn't decay the flesh. It doesn't decompose the flesh because of the structures of the flesh that they find in these peat bogs. So it would be nice to sort of here we go. Just something quick here. Bogs cure bodies in a process akin to tanning. But while they are wonderful at preserving skin, they eat away at bones, leaving the body's skeletons shrunken and sometimes completely with the bones absent. At the same time, acids in bog water destroy DNA, making it sometimes difficult to identify who we're looking at. So before we have a break, I want to talk about Lindo Woman. And then we'll do a little bit more of science. Then we'll do Lindo Man, and then we'll do the article at the end. So let's do Lindo Woman. So here we go. Let's just do this. Lindo Woman. Lindo Woman was found on the 13th of May, 1983, not on the 1st of August, 1984, when Lindo Man was found. This is Lindo Woman. And now known scientifically as Lindo 1. Lindo Man known as Lindo 2. Interestingly, found near Wilmslow, Lindo Moss, Cheshire. They were a head was found by peat cutters on the 13th of May, 1983. And when they found this round thing on the conveyor belt, as they were cutting peat, it's likely that they thought it was a football and they kicked it around a little bit. This round thing that was later found out to be a skull with flesh still on it was found by Andy Mould and Stephen McDooley. And in the next bit, when we look at Lindo Man, we look at Mr. Slacker. I'm not making this up. Anyway, what they found as they're cutting the peat, it goes on a conveyor belt, and on the conveyor belt they found this like football size thing, and they actually, and you know, it's like they kicked it around a bit. And the reason why they kicked it around a bit, when some of the peat came off it, it's described that they found an incomplete human head. It was lacking its lower mandible. The soft tissue was still there. The brain tissue was oozing out. And one of the eyes was hanging out by its optical nerve. And some of the hair was there. So you can imagine they must have kicked it around a bit, because that's why the eye was hanging out, right? And guess what? They summoned the police. Actually, if I was a peat cutter, right, I wouldn't have summoned the police, because they couldn't cut any peat for a few days, so it affected their livelihood. Anyway, I would have quickly just disposed of the head, to be honest with you. Anyway, they reported this to the police, and they found out that there was a cold case going back to 1961. And this cold case going back to 1961 involved a Peter Reinbrot, who was suspected as killing his wife, Malika de Fernandez. And they didn't find the body. Anyway, when questioned, Peter Reinbrot assumed that the skull fragment came from his wife's body. So he immediately admitted to killing his wife. 22 years later, he said, "It has been so long, I thought I would never be found out. I did it." So he admitted that that was actually his wife's head. But whilst the head sat on the desk of the police sergeant, they realized that the hair color was not the same color as this guy's wife who had disappeared in 1961. They also realized that the head was probably of a much older woman. But they took his confession and they basically said, in typical police fashion back in the 1980s, under the Sweeney time, okay, we've got a confession, it is his wife, and they didn't research it any further. At that point, the flesh was starting to decay on the police sergeant's desk. He confessed to killing Malika de Fernandez in July 1961 because, drum roll, because what it was, he met his wife. He proposed to her within days. Not so long. The marriage only lasted for 2 months. She buggered off abroad, and then she found her husband Peter in bed with another man. So she come in the house. She said, "Right, I'm going to tell the police that you're having sex with this man, right?" And basically, he said when she said that to him, he decided to kill her. And basically, short story, but we'll go into this in a short while at the end. Short story has it that he got a bit angry and decided to cut her up into little pieces. Panicked, didn't know what to do, so decided to discard the body in the peat bog. So he admitted to this. He went to court in December 1983. At the time, the head was being taken to Oxford University because they suspected something not quite right. And they found out that the skull dated to 250 years AD, nearly 1,800 years before the death of Peter's wife. But even though they didn't find the guy's wife's body, it went through Crown Court, and because he admitted it. But then when his defense had found out that it wasn't his wife's skull, he revoked the confession. But because he was so eloquent in saying that he'd killed his wife through all the details, he was still found guilty. The body has never been found. The body of his actual wife has never, ever been found. So they found other remains there. So before we have a break, I want to give you some other little bits of science. The chemistry of bog bodies. The sphagnum moss can only grow in a temperature of around 4 degrees C. In the summer months, if it goes up to 10 degrees C for a small amount of time, that's fine. But it can't get any drier than that. It can't get any warmer than that. If it does, moisture starts to get underneath the sphagnum moss with bacteria and oxygen and starts to eat away at everything. The pH level of sphagnum moss, the smagnan, underneath the sphagnum moss needs to be around 3.3 to 4.5 degrees C. With that, it dissolves minerals, calciums. It basically, the dying moss releases sugars and humic acids, which is the smagnon. And then that acts to eat away at the oxygen and anything else, and it stops any bacteria, it kills any bacteria. The resulting effect is to preserve these bodies. I'd like to say one thing before we have a break, and we'll put everybody's mics on. Who actually likes whiskey?
I do.
Well, you would do. You're Scottish. You don't count.
Yes.
Right, so you know when you drink your whiskey, right? When it comes from the waters come from a bog, right? Did you know that smagnon that you're actually drinking as a key ingredient for the whiskey is made up of calcium from bones and all sorts of things that go down the night.
It's peaty. It is
Yes.
peaty.
It's very peaty. So
Yeah.
So what we're going to do, is there any questions, and we'll have a break, because I need a cup of tea and I need a bit of cake. No? Good. I'm going to keep the mic on.
The only thing I was going to say was, I think now, talking about Anne's problem with sacrifice and the way they did it and everything, and how could they do this to children? Well, I suppose when the Jews came, Hebrews, they were the ones who started sacrificing animals.
Yeah, those were
they thought it was okay. They thought it was okay sacrificing animals to Yahweh, because it stopped them killing people, I suppose.
Interestingly, the other Anne.
They just have different rituals, don't they? And different religions.
Yes. Yeah. But then then you got rid of.
Anne, let the other Anne talk. Go on, Anne.
Which one?
You.
I was just saying that all religions have their rituals, and they obviously all believe in what they're doing. If they're sacrificing whatever they're doing, it's part of their belief, and it's all right by everybody because it's holy or sacred. Or
Yeah, yeah, cool.
That's true. And one final thing I would say is that in Central and South America, what they do, they cremate people. And they get those ashes together. They put that into a porridge, and they all indigest the person that's just been cremated.
Oh,
So it keeps some of that person inside you.
oh, right, okay.
more sensitive things.
It's something to do, isn't it? You know, I tell you what, I like those ears of Del. Maybe I could cut them off. Right, okay. Let's take a break and we'll go from there. Thank you. I'm gonna tea.
Okay.
And you can be left with Pete Marsh. Right, excellent. Okay, so. Oh, shit. La 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 la. And we'll sing and we'll march through the cobble streets of Rochester. Oh, come a waltzy Matilda with me. Waltzy Matilda, waltzy Matilda. Who come a waltzy Matilda with me? And we'll sing and we'll march through the cobble streets of Rochester. Who come a sailing in a waltzy Matilda with me? I think Del will. He's into singing. Waltzy Matilda, Who come along, see Matilda with me, and we'll sing on out through the double streets of Rochester. Grandma Waltz, what the hell is that now? Oh, we're sitting by the door. What was I saying? So come on, waltz, see Matilda with me. Waltz.
This is shiny, sometimes I think on the billabong. You come and walk, sing Matilda with me.
Waltz, see Matilda. Waltz, see Matilda. Waltz, see Matilda.
He hasn't put Henry on yet. He's shut off. They're all shut off, except me and you.
Oh yeah, just I didn't notice that, yeah.
Yeah. So your daughter's okay, is she?
They're all okay. Grandson I had two grandsons had birthdays
Oh.
in the last couple of weeks. And
Oh.
not been very great for them, really, you know. Can't be their mates, can they? Because they're teenagers.
Yeah. Oh, there was a lovely programme on last night about the Lake District.
Yes, I saw the beginning of it. The one about, I know that was this morning, the Lake District. Now, I was watching Mary Beard last night with her Roman stuff.
Oh, you didn't do his Welsh programme?
Pardon?
Did you do his Welsh programme?
Yeah.
Did you do Carl's Welsh
No.
history? No. No, I watched that. It started off with sheep. I thought it was just like the one, like every week they seem to have like the history of cows or the life of sheep or pigs, you know. And it's a whole hour. It's a whole hour of
the knowledge about everything, really, isn't it? I mean,
but it was a beautiful program last night. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful program last night. Yeah.
I didn't see that one. In fact, I'm not watching much television at the moment. I'm watching a bit, but not a lot.
Yeah.
The National Theatre's doing stuff on YouTube. I watched something on that. The night before.
Are you from Cumbria?
No. You can hear a Brummie accent.
Where are you from?
Brummie. You can hear a Brummie accent. Birmingham.
Yes, I thought I could. I got a friend, yeah.
I haven't lived there for over 60 years, and I've never lost the accent.
No. My friend, we had a lady from, she had to go to Birmingham. She was an evacuee.
Oh, yeah.
And
how'd you go to Birmingham? There ain't bombs in Birmingham. They were moving people out. Oh, in
yeah, I know. She went to,
That makes sense.
I don't know if it might have been somewhere just outside Birmingham. But she was real broad, you know, even though she was born in Wales, in the valleys, she had this Birmingham accent, you know. And then she came back to Wales, and then she went back to and forward a few times, you know, and she still sounded like Birmingham, you know. I think it's such a strong, it's probably a strong, you know, it's just a strong accent, you know.
Just something moving until not my middle daughter. You take her somewhere a fortnight, she's talking the accent we're in. She picks it up. We had spent a lot of time in Wales. We first had a second home, and then we lived in Wales. And when you take her over, she'd have the accent in no time. Whereas I never hear other accents. I I've only got what I've got.
Yeah.
And I didn't try really, although Birmingham accent was very denigrated, and you look down on an idiot if you've got such a very low class.
Oh, it's a very soft.
It was certainly thought like that.
It's a very soft. It's a soft Birmingham you've got.
Instead, I sounded like Peaky Blinders, or something which I haven't seen. So, but no, accents have become more accepted, but certainly there's some in terms of trucks and stuff like that. It's a disadvantage having an accent. Well,
it's only a soft accent, you know. It's not a real, you know, nasally brummy. It's only a soft Birmingham accent you've got.
What you hear around you. I mean, it's not.
Remember,
you can't choose your. Well, you can choose your accent later. You can change it, but usually it's just what you hear around you. And so, if you live in an area where it's very broad, that's what you sound like. And if you live in a, you know, in
yeah.
I'm
trying to think where she lived now. Redditch, I think.
Redditch, yeah.
That's where they lived, because she said at one time she used to go to the castle. There was a castle there.
Redditch isn't in Birmingham. It's a town outside Birmingham.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? No, I think she must have gone. Yeah, I know why they went to Birmingham.
Because Birmingham was an industrial town, so it was heavily under German bombing. And so they out to Birmingham because it's an industrial town, as they were bombing all the industry, weren't they? So I was evacuated. I was, when was I, 2, 3? And I was evacuated out with my mother. You know, they took babies out with their mothers to evacuate them.
I might have got that wrong now, because I think her parents went to Birmingham to work in the aircraft factory, and I think they left her behind. But then she must have met somebody in Birmingham on one of her visits, and they went up to Birmingham then, or to, you know, Redditch.
Who's this, your daughter?
No, I can't remember the lady's name now. She used to go to Warwick Castle and Kenilworth.
Yeah, all in that bit.
You know, I mean, she's passed away now. Jean.
Oh, my Jean.
She had a little soft Birmingham accent as well.
It wouldn't have been Birmingham from Redditch. It would have been a Midland accent.
It's a Midland, yeah, Midland. Because I mean, I got cousin lives in Stoke-on-Trent, and they got a, you know, like slightly more northern Midland accent. You know, I love listening to them.
The accents are interesting, and it's I don't know, it's nice to hear all the different accents and the way people use them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Newport.
There are some, when they are very strong, you can't quite understand. You know,
No.
Glaswegian or something like that, which is very strong. It's difficult because they use different words as well. It's not just the accent; it's the vocabulary.
Karl does a great Barry accent.
Yeah.
Don't you, Karl? Oh, he's eating.
I found this in a bin.
Oh.
In the bin. Well.
No, they're going down to the Iceland bin where they chuck stuff out. So this is one of them.
Right.
Are you still taking stuff out of the bins?
Yeah. Where do you think I get the chocolate from for the children's Christmas stockings?
Yes, there's a lot of.
Well, you know, you just wouldn't believe the amount of food waste, you know, good quality food waste that goes
And I think this
in
panic
the bin.
buying fresh fruit and vegetable, I think that was dreadful because it won't keep. And half of it away. If you overbuy on stuff like that, you can't keep it fresh. And unless it'll freeze, and not a lot of fruit and veg will freeze.
Look at the size of the strawberries from my garden. Look at that.
You've turned Henry off. You've turned Henry off.
No, I haven't.
And Alice. Oh, they turned themselves off then.
Yeah, I've been tuned.
Gardener, I hate gardening. I like garden produce, but I've never been able to garden.
I don't do any gardening. Joe does it all.
No.
I really tried hard. I read books and learned about their science and all sorts. And I think I took all black fingers because as soon as I looked at a plant, it sort of keeled over. So I gave up on it. And I was bad with photography. I'm not good at photography. But at least the digital camera rescued me a bit from that, you know, because I didn't have to throw all the real film away that I read. But gardening, I can't.
Oh. Well, Joe, Henry's he was born in Limerick, but he was
up in Ireland.
To Portsmouth, I think. Southampton.
And he's got a French name.
And he's posh.
And he's posh.
Yeah.
Because he lives in Wick.
We certainly do.
And he lives in a brand new house.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know.
Right, okay, let's get started. For God's sake, you lot are like an old. It's like an old granny's meeting.
We are old.
Well, my last house got burnt down by Hitler.
My oldest granddaughter's 29, so I'm a very old granny.
Your oldest granddaughter is
106.
29.
Right, okay. Right, Anne. Shush. Right, okay. Right, okay. Anne, I tell you what, should we have like an Anne evening?
Yeah.
Well, on the agenda. I'm not going there. Right. Okay. Right. So first things first. Anyone who's got any articles, like wonderful Henri, get them to me, or get them to me in the post. I would like to mention that we are planning some things in advance, but it's. I won't say what I was just about to say. We've applied for a grant for 10 tablets. Computer tablets. Some will be distributed to members in Bridgend, and some will be distributed to those in LANGFORD if we get the money through. So they'll have a recording of these classes, and they will be able to keep up to date.
Oh.
So we've applied for it. Right. Okay. And obviously we've got our mobile library as well, and I would like to say that who is also going to be doing the class. Are you going to be joining us on Saturday, Del?
I'm not sure yet. It depends on what's going on.
I think
family wise.
Yeah, Alice will be joining us on Saturday.
Yeah, I hope so.
Good. And I don't know if Pat joins us on Saturday, but I know Pat joins us on a Wednesday, so there you go. So and obviously next week I've told you what we're doing next week. We're doing the archaeology of a Welsh princess and the archaeology of a Welsh king. So that's what we'll be doing next week, and then we're going to be doing a whole new load of lectures, and the whole new load of lectures will be based on major archaeological events in history, such as the destruction of Varus's legions in the Teutoburg forest. So so what you can see is skulls of Roman soldiers being smashed to bits, women being tied to trees and cut in half, little children's bodies being pulled in two. All that wonderful archaeological evidence we'll be looking at in a few weeks' time. It would have been good if Dorothy would have joined us today, but obviously we couldn't get her on speaker.
She sends her best wishes to Del and you and Henry and Pat.
Tell her thank you.
Tell her thank you.
I will.
Tell her thank you.
She hasn't met the other lady, so
Well,
I hope you forgive us.
we don't, you
But
know.
we'll have to show you Dorothy one day.
Yeah, I miss the Welsh cakes, not her.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say I would say the way this is going to roll out, probably in about 6 months' time, I'll be suggesting that people meet in people's homes in small groups of 1 or 2, and probably back meeting in the hall in about a year's time. That's probably the schedule. So if there's no other questions, we're going to get back into it. My wonderful Michelle has turned up, so I'll let her struggle to open the door. And what we're going to do, we're going to look at some articles of the week, which I've got in front of me. There is that wonderful coin. There is that wonderful coin. Hello, beautiful Michelle.
I've missed Alice's face. I've missed your face, Alice.
Anne, can you let me?
I can't see you.
Anne, oh, I'm turning everybody's
Next
mic.
week, perhaps.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm turning your mic off. Right, okay. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to be doing some articles of the week. How I weeded out a 670-year-old coin. A university lecturer was stunned to discover a 670-year-old coin in his garden whilst weeding his raspberries. Jamie Pringle, who's a member of the Pringle Crisp family, was gardening with his 2 children on Saturday last week when one fell down a hole. In falling down the hole, they looked at the bottom of the hole and they found a silver half-groat dating to the reign of Edward III, found in their garden. There he is.
Oh.
So there's that one. Look at that, the oldest rope. There it is, a little bit of old rope. Hey, get that bit of old rope? No strings attached. It's the world's oldest rope. A tiny piece of thread, up to 52,001 years old on the 14th of October, may weave a giant new strand into the story of humanity. It is the oldest scrap of rope or string in the world. 3 intertwined strands and 1/4 of an inch long were found attached to a piece of flint. And it's said that this was produced by a Neanderthal community. So all we need now is headlines, Neanderthals manufactured washing machines, and we'll have the full set. I gotta make the obvious comment, right? If Neanderthals invented everything, including fire, building homes, painting in caves, the first to hunt absolutely everything, right? Shouldn't we actually say that we're actually directly descended from Neanderthals? Oh, this is another great one, right? You'll never believe it. Monkeys who sailed across the Atlantic.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
Monkeys who sailed 901.5 miles across the Atlantic. Intrepid monkeys made an improbable sea voyage after
With their
making
coconuts.
after making a raft. 34
Well,
million.
someone's a daydream believer then.
Anyway, so oh God, no. Anyway, 34 million years ago, the stunning conclusion comes after scientists discovered fossilized monkeys' teeth from exactly the same monkeys of teeth that were found in Egypt. And they reckon it's from the same monkey. The likeness between the monkey's molars led researchers to believe the extinct primate species must have migrated from Africa on a raft. He's got it there. They made a raft out of coconuts, apparently, and here we go. This is from the University of Southern California. It would have to be, wouldn't it?
Oh, there you go.
Is it the Daily Mail by any chance?
No, it's a Daily Mail. Here we go. And it goes, the thing that strikes me about this study more than any other I've been involved in is just how improbable all of this is. The fact there is this remote site in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Amazon jungle, that the chances of finding these pieces is extremely small, and that we're revealing this very improbable journey made by these early monkeys. It's all quite remarkable. Do you know what, on that one? I'm going to say It was aliens. Right, so here we go. If we look there, we got some nice pottery. Secrets of the Stone Age, dirty dishes.
This is the milk one.
Yeah, that's one. Failing to wash the dishes properly does not go down well in most households except for Anne's. But the fact, yeah, she is a washerwoman. But the fact our Stone Age ancestors left their pots dirty with food left over is proving invaluable to archaeologists. They say it enables them to carry out highly accurate dating based on chemical changes in the fat deposits from food, like lactic acids. The evidence comes from a site at Shoreditch, East London. And the site dates back to 5,602.5 years ago. The pots and the statue of Lloyd George were left behind by some of the London's earliest East Enders, not Coronation Street, who were farmers who feasted on goat, beef, lamb, and dairy products. Hailed the trove as extraordinary, the most important find ever. It comprises 436 fragments from at least 24.5 vessels, weighing nearly 14 pounds. And they found evidence of fatty acids and various other things indicating the types of things that we're eating. Oh, God, please save me from any more of this. Right, okay, here we go. Free delivery for 6 weeks. Oh, no, not that. Right. Hellfire that ended the cult of human sacrifice. Here we go. I love this one. They obviously know this is fact. Wait for the punchline. The boy struggled, but with his hands were bound, and the priest, a towering figure, was too strong. Pacing behind them with a 16-inch blade in one hand, the priestess, so in other words, in the story, it's moved from a priest being a priestess in the same paragraph, was indifferent to the pleadings of the young. For miles, they had walked from the great city of Knossos, cradle of the Minoan civilization, up into the rocky wilderness surrounding the summit of Mount Junctas, where the temple of Animoscivilia was tucked away. The young man's cries of desperation were carried away in the clamor. A menacing roar erupting from the sky at Santorini, about 100 miles north. Ash fell from the darkening sky, coating the landscape in white. There was no time to be lost if the gods were to be placated and the world restored to order. By necessity, the ceremony was brief and brutal. The victim was strapped to the altar, a bare stone slab, as the priestess called on the deities to accept the offering. A jab up the buttocks, spelling blood into a jar, but it was too late. The volcano at Santorini erupted, killing both the lad and the priestess, proving that human sacrifice didn't work. And the bodies were buried forever, never to be found again. So in other words, right, they've got no evidence this event ever occurred, right? And they're saying in this article that stopped people sacrificing people to the gods, right? Because it didn't work.
Who read the article?
This is the Daily Mail.
Oh, it's the Daily Mail, yes. Well.
And just this last one from the Daily Mail. This is from last week, but another one. We mentioned this last week, but well, I'll put a bit more detail. Why chicken was a bird of prayer, and not eaten. And it's basically saying in this article, because there were 1 or 2 chickens in Iron Age Britain, right, and there were a few rabbits wandering around and not many, it's proof categorically that they were gods, right? And there's no other evidence. I tell you what, whoever writes this stuff in the bloody Daily Mail needs to be shot. Do you know what? She's been saving that stuff for a month. I wish she hadn't bothered. Oh no, we love Ellen to bits, but you know she's a strange one. But anyway, right. So right, where are we going to go next? Let's get on with it. By the way, this is probably going to. So what we're going to do, right? I'm gonna mute the Anns. I'm gonna mute the Alice for now. And I'm gonna mute the Del. And I'm gonna have Pat and Henry joining me on my little journey. Is that okay?
Yep.
And Pat's probably fallen asleep anyway. Do you know the wonderful thing about Pat coming to my class is that I can guarantee that no matter what I say, she's not going to have heard it anyway. So I can say what I like. And she's not even replying. Right. So you, oh, you're still there. I knew you would be, because you've got your husband in the background with a prong poking you. So here we go. And there's this little article here. If you can see this, let me know. Here we go. This article is as part of a bigger archaeology article, and the subtitle is Skincare Secrets. So I'm going to read this out in full. It helps us put all the science of the bog together in a way. Skincare secrets. Although Tollan Man's skin didn't rot away, the mummification process did change its appearance and texture. Like the KARL Man, the Harald-Scandja woman, and lots of other bog bodies, he's got quite a tan going on. Bog bodies often sport leathery, dark brown skin. Some of them also have preserved hair. That was dyed red after death, obviously dyed red due to the conditions of being placed in the bog in the first place. Or they may have had red hair in the first place. If I ever said to Michelle she had fake red hair, she would bury me because she's got real red hair. But anyway, on this note, this is most likely caused by Magnum from the Magnum moss. A recent discovered polymer that seeps out of the dead Magnum moss. Leather is made through a process that strengthens the bonds between some of the natural fibers in animal hides. As a tanning agent, Smagnan, not the Smagnon, has the same effect on human skin, rendering it tough and tea-colored. Smagnon also binds with nitrogen, which bacteria need to survive. So by removing nitrogen from the environment, Magnum, so it basically feeds off the nitrogen, in doing so, killing off the bacteria, and the smagnon itself stops the spread of microorganisms under the surface of the smagnon moss. And therefore, smagnon, along with the acid that it turns into, pulls calcium right out of the dead body. So in other words, what we're talking about, it sort of absorbs the calcium. I'm talking about a smagna as a living organism, but it's not. It's a chemical organism, if that makes any sense. Bones get weakened in the process. Although smagnon does a fine job of preserving skin, its calcium thievery isn't great for skeletons. Mummies have been found in certain bogs with soft, extra flimsy bones that are about as sturdy as cardboard and that have been distorted by heavy peat. But that's assuming the decalcification process doesn't altogether eliminate them. Lots of bog bodies have been found missing bones, and some of the mummies are totally boneless. The latter are basically human-shaped bags of leathery skin wrapped around some pickled organs. I like that, and I love the description. And so what we're going to do, we've got two last bits left of this lecture. And I'm going to get straight down to my undies, and I'm going to give you some great information about our wonderful Lindo Man. What can you see on the screen at this minute, wonderful Henri?
Just your face.
Do you know what? You just seeing my face. Have you noticed my nose has got bigger recently?
And your ears.
I tell you what, I wasn't having a go at Dal's ears. I think Dal's ears are lovely. Oh. Anyway, Lindo Man, Lindo 2, known as Peat Marsh. Now this is another interesting story associated with the finding of Lindo Woman a year earlier. This was found on the 1st of August 1984. The body was placed face down into Lindo moss. The body was freeze-dried not long after its discovery, so it's still more or less as perfect as when it was found, even better, but it's displayed upright. So Lindo moss. We know a lot about Lindo moss, but a little bit more information. Lindo moss, Wilmslow, Cheshire, was once common land, but you couldn't do much with it other than, well, actually cutting peat, to be honest with you. Common land is usually land that isn't brilliant for agriculture, like a bog like this. I've mentioned that initially Lindo moss was a basin of water created by the last ice age melt. Once covering over 1,500 acres, now it's a tenth of the size. It's known in the 17 and if not the 1600s for a place that you would not go to. You would not go to the middle of the boggy landscape because the fairies would pull you in. Oh yeah, I forgot this isn't my Saturday lecture, but the will-o'-the-wisp, you would follow the light in the bog, the gases coming up from the bog, and you would follow the will-o'-the-wisp and you would go to your death. It was in the 1980s that the mechanization of extracting peat came to fruition. And this is why we're getting lots of bodies found across Lindo moss. Lindo Man is one of 27 bodies to have been recovered from that area in the Midlands, with various other mires and mosses within that landscape. We mentioned something about temperatures. We mentioned about the acidity. Remember, the moss landscape has to have a mean 4 degrees C for things to be preserved. And we're talking about a pH level of about 3.3 to 4.5. Anything below that is too acidic. Anything above that is too alkaline. The same thing happens. Now, so obviously radiocarbon dating is rather different. They think that the radiocarbon dating of Lindo Woman takes her around 200 years AD, folks. However, that means that Lindo Woman is later in time than Lindo Man, because Lindo Man's about 50, maybe 100 years AD, so there's 100 years apart. But these were found about 250 meters away from each other. Now, Henri, no laughing. On the 1st of August, 1987, Andy Mould and Mr. Slacker were working on the peat, putting peat onto the elevator, the conveyor belt, to be in, so that the peat went into the shredding machine. And then Andy Mould found what he thought was a bit of wood. And he chucked a bit of wood at Eddie Slacker, right? Now that's his nickname, Slacker, because he's Eddie Slack. He chucked it at Eddie Slacker, and basically the earth fell off it. It wasn't a bit of wood at all. It was actually a foot, right? So so they found this foot on the 1st of August 1984. You couldn't make this up. And then reported it to the police. Look, we found a foot. And the police thought, oh my God, here we go again now. We've actually found the body of this woman who died in 1961. So anyway, the archaeologist got involved, a certain Rick Turner, who became an archaeologist in Wales and who worked for Cadw. Actually, I couldn't stand the man, to be honest with you. I thought he was a plank. But there's a double joke there. They thought it was a bit of wood plank.
Yeah, all right, okay.
You saw that coming in there, right? And then what happened, interesting enough, the archaeologist went on site. The company that owned the landscape were really upset that, you know, they had to shut down the site again. So the archaeologist said it's tough, human remains. The police said it's tough, it's human remains. But what they did, they block cut it. They cut a block of peat out, and then they moved that to Macclesfield District General Hospital. And they found out that that it wasn't Malika. It was actually the remains of somebody rather old. Strangely enough, the law was a bit different then. The owners of the land donated the body to the British Museum. Under the new Ministry of Justice rules, if you find a body, then the Ministry of Justice decide who it belongs to, right? But by the 21st of August, it's on its way to London, right? And it's being really looked after. It's being loved, and it's being looked after. And this is what I mean. We can do things really right in archaeology in Britain.
And this is the same time as St. Bede's excavation as well.
This is about 3 years on. It is the same time. They freeze dried the body. They were able to freeze dry it. And I mentioned about Tollan as well, Henry, about Tollan being in a very fine state of preservation. That was found in the 1950s. So there was no excuse for the way they treated St. Bede's. Yes, good interjection there. And the other thing as well is about the Lindo bodies. They found other bodies since. They found a fragment of a headless body we're talking about 1987 on the 6th of February, again found by workers. The police decided not to bother, and they found 70 pieces of human remains at Lindo Moss. And then on the 14th of June 1988 they found they found a left leg and buttocks with an incision in one of the buttock cheeks. Don't go there. And then by the 12th of September, they found a right thigh, and they believed that these might actually be part of the original Lindo Man. Okay. Oh God, this is getting hard work. This is right. Okay. So the remains and investigation. So really, when we think about these bodies, and I tell you what, it's wonderful to have a wonderful woman like Michelle who brings me cups of tea. She's such a darling. Obviously, you know, we've had lots of bog bodies have been found over the generations. We know about Lindo Man. We know that Lindo Man was about my height, 5'8". He weighed about 9.5 stone. He was a little bit lighter than me. And we know his original hair was brown. He had brown sideburns, a mustache and a trim beard, and he had manicured fingernails, and he had no visible cavities in his teeth. So his skull was quite, you know, really intact. And as they examined his gut, they realized they had whipworm, mowworm, and he suffered from osteoarthritis, and he was sort of in his 20s. So, you know, a few other facts before I do the last article, which I'm going to screen share with you, folks and folkasses. In Britain, since 1995, the total number of bodies found in England and Wales is 106. And can I find a bog body that's been found in Wales? Can I, bejesus, not? But if anyone can actually find one, that'd be great. And that other insignificant place that's part of England, Scotland, they found 34 bodies in Scotland so far. Just trying to wind you up, Alice. So what we're going to do now, we're going to share an article, and it'll really close this lecture nicely. So we're going to share an article with you, and before Anne moans and says, "Oh, I got to pay for the parking, it's getting a bit late," well, you know, just fall asleep. It's fine. Right. So let's share the screen. And if I can remember, here we go. I think this is the right one. Oh, there we go. Do you know what, Henry? Yeah. Look at that face.
Yeah, it's peaceful.
That is so peaceful. Do you know, this isn't to sound racist, but if this body had been found in Africa, and that's the point actually, if this body had been found in Africa, you would immediately assume that it's an African with black, very dark skin. And that's another point to be seen here, but we're not going to go there. But other than the dark color skin, this person is really, really peaceful. And to be honest with you, we don't really know the skin color of the people that were around in Britain at this time either. Probably slightly darker than we think that they were. Bodies in the bog. And so the other one with us at this minute is Pat. What do you think about that image, Pat? Oh God, she has fallen asleep. What you can see is part of a noose around the individual's neck.
Yeah, is that leather or is that a leather noose?
I think that's the leather noose. We'll come back to that. I think that was a leather noose. Hang on, if we go back again, I'm just gonna double check, because when you've done a load of these today, it's difficult to work out what was around their necks after a while. I'm going to double check this one a minute, and I want to answer that question because it would be good to look at that one. It's saying in the article that we looked at earlier on, suffocation. So we had. It doesn't actually say.
No.
Oh, yeah. Well, it does look leather, doesn't it?
It's just the way it's actually woven together looks more, rather than
it does look leather. Yeah. Now this was found in the 1950s, 1950, and it's so well preserved. And do you know what? We've mentioned St. Bede's a few times, and I need to get off my high horse about that one. But a guy watched my video on the internet, and he said, actually, I've researched that they found up to a dozen knights in Britain perfectly preserved, and every single one of them they've reburied. We don't have a single one of them, and it's really strange, very strange. At the end of the most recent ice age, around 11,000 years ago, we got that. We know it was a habitat of woodland, scrub, and mosaics. We know that very near a modern city, so obviously that's going to affect the ground. In the 1500s, we've got very in marginal land, people are eking out a precarious living, and I'm sure that if these people are coming across bodies like this, they would have made really good fuel. And I may sound a bit strange, that if you find skin like this well preserved, you could actually make it into a bag, whether it's human or not. If you're very poor, that's what you're going to do. I'm sorry. I'm not talking ridiculous there. If you get something that's been treated like leather, you could sell that. Yeah. So obviously they're removing the and in the bogs as well. They're not only getting bog oak, which is also a good fuel. They're getting bog iron, which is okay for agricultural tools, not weapons. And another thing, the other thing I would say is if you're burning peat burns at a very low temperature and produces a very low heat. So it's not that good for industrial processing, but it's okay to sort of keep a mean heat in a building, put it that way. So you'd lay the peat out in the sun upright, and then you would turn it around, and then eventually it'd be ready to use. So obviously go on.
In Ireland, you'd still see even today where farmers would still stack, it looked like a little building with a long one, which is just stacks of peat.
A bit like a hay bale, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And in Orkney, they're actually Michelle. You know when we were in Orkney, you know the stacks of peat. They're actually stacked up in Orkney. They're stacked not in that way. They're stacked in stacks. Horizontal stacks, not vertical or diagonal stacks. They're very strange.
It's a much smaller operation on Orkney. It's much bigger in Ireland.
Oh, don't compare Ireland with Orkney. And why? How have you got your mic on? Anyway, so what we've got here, a little bit of information which we don't need to recap, but a few dates here: 13th of May 1983. Andy Mould and Stephen Dooley. And mentioning, here we go, another story about this is that they thought this black leathery soccer ball was in fact a dinosaur egg. And basically, as we basically said, the only way you could get a piece of the optic nerve and the eye sort of coming out of the eye socket is that you must have kicked it or something.
Yeah.
There's no other explanation. You must have really given it a good old leathering, and I don't think they would have explained that to the police. And we know about the body, and but this guy who was done for the murder of his wife, even though that the head wasn't his wife, he had already done time for sex crimes, and going back to what it says here. So here we go.
Until proved guilty.
Yes, just hours from the first meeting to proposal, and then only 4 days until their wedding. Their union was similarly brief, lasting just a few months. Fernandez returned to traveling using her new husband's discounted airfare, while Peter Redbrandt settled into a cottage with a lover, a man. So basically, she tried to blackmail him. So to avoid prosecution, Peter Brandt said, "Something just boiled over inside me." Later, while on trial, newspapers reported that he grabbed her shoulders and did not realize she was dead until he stopped shaking her. "I was terrified and could not think clearly. The only thing that came to my mind was to hide her. He used an axe to dismember her remains, then tried to burn them. When that failed, he scattered them in the bog." So in other words, we don't need to do any more of that. We know he was found guilty, but eventually the skull, it was not the woman's body. It was from somebody centuries and centuries before. And obviously he was convicted. He was convicted of murder by a jury of 11-1. I think the one that didn't vote to have him in prison was probably having a good old laugh at the time. So anyway, so looking at, we got some nice images coming up on this article as well. So this sordid tale might have slipped away as just another gruesome historical anecdote. Nobody would have known about this head at Lindo Moss, and it's likely as well that it wouldn't have been recorded as one of the bog bodies either. It would have just been forgotten in history. However, on August the 1st, 1984, mold removed a piece of what he thought was bogwood. When it gave it a little clean, then we saw the toenails. Well, the other story actually is he chucked it over to his mate Slacker. And obviously that's another story. So in other words, the firm, they shut the firm down and started working on the site, and the archaeologist Rick Turner got to the site, and they worked out quite clearly that what was part of a foot was disconnected from the other part of the body. And we've got bog bodies. Somebody asked me today, you know, do you find bog bodies in other parts of the world? And I struggled with the answer. I said, obviously, we got them in Europe, you know, sort of France, Netherlands, Germany. Have we got them anywhere else? We may have one or two in North America, to be honest with you, but no, not got the conditions usual that we actually find them to be preserved. And you know, you asked about Tollan Man. It was a leather garrote around his neck, Henry.
Right.
There you go. And it says here, could almost pass for an old man peacefully sleeping.
Yeah, very much so.
With a hat still on his head, whiskers on his chin. So, you know, when people brutally say that these are murder victims, right? I hate it when everything in history, everybody that is always found, everyone always says, oh, this person must have died because this person must have been murdered, or it was a sacrifice because they're not found in a cemetery always. But lots of the evidence tells us that that is simply not the case with some of these bog bodies. Obviously, I agree, I concur that there's lots of other things going on. I wasn't there either. Magnum mosses change the chemistry, and there's our Lindo Man again,
yep.
Of the bodies of water around them, making them highly acidic. As the floating mosses die, they build up layers at the bottom of the bog. The decaying mosses release sugars and humic acids into the water, which consume oxygen as they break down. With the surface blocked by the live moss, the water becomes anaerobic. So what I've done today is I've used so many different ways of explaining what the smagna is, the sphagnum moss, and the processes, and at least one of them must have sunk in, because sometimes it's very difficult to put this across. Under these conditions, human tissues don't decay. As we know, it turns to leather. Skin turns brown, and objects in and around the body dissolve away, as does most clothing. Or does it? The evidence with the Tollan body, you will see that it was probably that he never had any clothes on anyway, but let's just disagree to agree to disagree on that one. So the first bog body ever recorded was in 1640. So you can imagine just a little subtext. People have been cut in peat for, you know, thousands of years.
Centuries.
Yeah.
Yeah, thousands.
Yeah. And suddenly the only time they're recorded is in 1640, simply because people probably disposed of the bodies in the ways that we've discussed. And I would like to use a modern analogy. In Zimbabwe, people were getting so hungry, they were taking the skins off their floors, boiling them down and eating them, right? So if people are doing this today, they could have been doing, if people are really hungry, right, they would eat this flesh.
Yeah.
You know, I certainly would. And there's going to be nothing wrong with it. People would have known it's been in the ground for a while. And I'm told human flesh is quite, has quite a nice taste, particularly when it's boiled down. Since then, 1,000 bodies have been found across Europe, many of them not really recorded. You can imagine there's a peat digger. He finds a human body, and the last thing he wants to do is phone the police, right? Or he wants to get somebody involved, because that's his livelihood. That's her livelihood, after all. And up until the late 1800s, people were reburying the bodies. And then in 1871, they found the complete remains of, here we go, wait for it, this figure here. Tollan Man in 1873. They found an intact body and they smoked him. Well, it may sound unacademic, but at least they preserved the body. That's the main point. And it was in the 1950s. I tell you what, right? Even if they did that with St. Bees Man, we'd have St. Bees Man still.
So you'd have something, yeah.
Exactly. So let's not. 1871, they were thinking ahead. And in 1950s, what they did with Tollan Man, which we're going to look at, is they replaced the bog body. They replaced the bog water in the cells with liquid paraffin and then beeswax.
Right.
So that pads out basically the vesicles between the skin are padded out with beeswax, and it's like an oil. It's treated the whole thing, and this is where we're going. So initially what we've got Lindo Man, which was discovered after the day after they found the leg. We're told a foot, obviously different descriptions. A flap of skin was sticking out, and they assembled a team, and they dug a block of peat out, which was 3 meters by 2 meters, encompassing all the body, and they were able to study that in laboratory conditions. Now there he is. This is not Lindo Man. This is our Tollan Man. Yeah. But before we look at that image in a moment, we'll just finish this. We've got some parameters there of height about 5 up to about 8 inches, about 9.5 stone, strong, well built, and apparently not accustomed to heavy work. His nails were manicured, and his brown ginger hair and moustache neatly trimmed. And he was dumped face down. These words, dumped face down, are really unrespectful words, but we don't really know what they were thinking. Put a mystery in front of 5 scientists, it's saying, and it will come up with a dozen different answers. So back to some of the wounds. There was a V-shaped blow to the back of his head, forcing bone into the brain, which would have instantly killed the man, right? Death 1. Death 2. They say that was possibly caused by an axe. So death 2, a hard blow across his back with something blunt that broke his neck and at least 1 rib. That's the second death. Ligature marks on the neck where a sinew cord was found may indicate garroting. He's died a 3rd time, and another time he's died having his throat cut from ear to ear, and he may have also been stabbed. And there's lots of other wounds to his body. Some believe that it goes on to say the argument centers on which of these happened before his death, which caused his death, what was done to his lifeless body, and what happened to the body over its centuries in the bog that might mimic man-made injuries or natural injuries. So before we actually sort of get to the end of this today, I'd like to show you that you've got that garrote on the back of his neck. You've got the cap. He's totally naked with a belt, and I'm basically thinking, right, okay, looking on a scientific fronting, if all the clothing had rotted away, right, Why have we still got a belt there? And why have we still got a hat there? Why have we still got delicate sinews? The other thing as well is, if you're going to religiously kill somebody, you're going to want to know that they're bleeding. And all these other things that I've mentioned. I think he was laid to rest like that. Thank you very much. This is Tollan Man. And I believe that in the same cases I've just described, this is the same thing that would have happened with Lindo Man as well. Carrying on. Is it how are we doing? Is this okay with you, Henry?
Yeah, this is good. No, this is very good.
Well, so obviously, take the ligature marks back to Lindo Man. Disagreement continues over whether the cord was used to throttle Lindo Man or to help the blood drain when his throat was cut. So just think about it. If we look at elk, for example,
yeah,
they drain blood from a living elk, right? And in reindeers in North America, when Native Americans are draining blood, they drain blood from the living animal, and they basically apologize. They drain the life blood out. The animal then goes into a sleep and dies. And these are in both circumstances, they're done with respect, right? Human beings are animals as well. So you could do the same with people, okay? And the other thing as well is, it's an interesting thing is, you know, the cord around Lindo Man's neck may have been caused as the indentation in the neck may have been caused as the body expanded as part of the decomposition process.
Yeah.
Where the gases expand in the body before they're released. And the other thing as well is, these people may have known about decay and gases and all the rest of it. Do you know, we came across that the Windsy ones from the Low Countries, and the guts were hanging out. Maybe the guts were hanging out because they wanted to relieve gas from the body.
Gas from the body, yeah.
Doesn't that make sense?
That would make sense entirely.
It does make sense. It does entirely. So the blows to the head, we're talking about CT scans, X-ray scans, show that there was swelling in the brain. Obviously, there was damage to the brains because some of the bone from the axe wound made it into the brain. Swelling would occur over time, not instantly. So, you know, you're thinking that there's lots of different things. Maybe being bloodlet would make you go unconscious really quick. So there's no painful death here. If you don't respect anybody, why are you giving them a fairly unpainful death? Do you see where I'm going there? Why is this sounding as if it's a murder or something else? So the few other weird things is we got the sense of Lindo Man, high levels of copper pigmentation on the body, might relate to some kind of covering of copper pigmentation, or he worked in the copper industry. There you go, another way. What we find in the gut is Magnum moss spores. So he was in amongst the boggy landscape just before he died. We've got evidence of crushed wheat in his gut, and bran and barley grains and mistletoe pollen in his stomach. Mistletoe could be seen to be maybe poisonous, depending on which way you look at it. We've got roundworms, whipworms. All these are associated with Druidic rituals. But the weird thing is, if Lindo Man was laid to rest in Roman Britain, which Britain would be being slowly Romanized after 50 AD, then, you know, ritualistic killing was outlawed. Maybe this was a post-ritualistic killing, which, you know, you're killing somebody who's already dead to give them a level of respect. A few other things, interestingly enough, Michelle reminded me last night that, you know, to us, May the 1st is a very important day because that's our anniversary, which is the ancient festival of Beltane. And apparently, in Beltane, there's a ritual that would take place where a group of people would sit around eating bread, and the person who had the burnt piece of bread would be the devoted one and would be sacrificed. Michelle's pointing at the table that I should eat the burnt piece of bread and I'm going to be sacrificed tomorrow. The remains of the griddle cake found in Lindo Man's stomach with bran and char remnants would bear out this theory, but it's only a theory. So we've got lots of these senses of theories across this landscape. You know, having somebody having deformities might indicate that they should be sacrificed. Should be sacrificed, Helen. Michelle's just showed me an image of a body of a dog from Hallen, which looks like it may have been mummified. Anyway, back to the lecture. We're looking at Yeti girl may have been sacrificed because, not because she was had a deformity, because she had scoliosis. She was a ritualistic scapegoat. She basically said, you know, take me, I want to be ritualistically, you know, I want to give myself, we get rid of collective guilt. And all these other weird things that we could go into, but we haven't got time to go into. And finally, you could say that the body at Lindo Moss was entered into the bog because he had been a sacrificial victim associated with territorial boundaries, associated with some of the bodies found in Ireland. There's also another thing, that the person may have strayed into another territory and been killed because the bog would have been marginal land between two territories. That's another way of looking at it. The other thing as well is another writer tells us that Lindo Man may have been the victim of a robbery, and that the injuries may indicate, particularly the neck wound and the broken rib, may indicate somebody that had been killed as a victim of a robbery. And the idea that he was naked, there's lots of different ways of looking at that. Certainly, if you want to ritualistically die, you have to be naked. If you want to be ritualistically be disposed of, you have to be naked. Lots of evidence tells us that people who are ritualistically treated, who want to be preserved for a long period of time, need to be declothed. Simply because if you've got clothes on, that would aid bacteria to eat away at your flesh. So it's no good having clothes on when you're being disposed of. And just a few other things. It's, you know, when you think about various other theories, it's saying quickly, Tacitus writing around 100 years AD, that he writes about various traditions of the Iron Age. The coward, the shirker, and the disreputable body are drowned in miry swamps under a cover of wattled hurdles. Another writer, Didorius Siculus, writes about the goals involved in human sacrifice. One person would be sacrificed so that they could augur, they could soothsay the future. There would be a sense of foretelling the future. So if you stab somebody, they would jump up and down and scream, and blood would pour out, and they would go into convulsions, and you'd work out those convulsions to work out how the future is going to be. And in closing today, the scientific and historical arguments are likely to go on forever. Improved techniques and new technological finds will continue to give us fragments of information, tantalizing glimpses of a world long past, but may never get us to the truth behind these deaths. There are missing pieces to the puzzle, and more than one way the available pieces can be arranged. These gaps leave us plenty of room to speculate on these ancient people, their final hours, and the reasons for their deaths. Visit Lindo Man in the British Museum. He sometimes gets up to Manchester, but a good opportunity to understand what's going on. So what we're going to do, a couple of minutes questions, and then we'll call it a day. We're going to start off with Henri, who would like to say something.
Yeah, just on the, I think on the Irish ones, I think they're finding more and more wooden walkways in the bogs as well to certain areas where some of these bodies have been found.
Yes, like the sweet track at Scarra.
That reminds me of Glastonbury.
Hang on, I'm trying to get my words out. Like the sweet track, which is at not Starcar, Flagfen. The sweet track at Flagfen is what you've just described, Henri. Carry on, Henri. Anything else?
I think also the parallel between a number of the bodies, that the person seems to have been manicured, seems to have been well presented, seems to have been looked after, etc., etc. There's a parallel there from the, from the Danish ones through the Swedish ones through to the UK and then into Ireland as well.
And looking at those also in South America with the Inca people, I feel it's wrong for us to put modern parameters on this. Alice, what would you like to say?
I just found it fascinating how the body was preserved in the Stagnan, and how you went in behind it and told us about the chemistry behind that.
That was really important. That was key today. You can do this, but you need the chemistry. Anne, the other Anne first. Anne with glasses. Oh, God. Yeah, that Anne laughing. Yeah.
I found the whole thing really interesting. We had a lecture before about the bog bodies, which were kept in people's houses for generations. I remember that being very interesting.
Callahallen. Michelle just showed me the dog buried at Callahallen, which yes, so it was Callahallen, yes, and South Uist.
In my mind, because it was a different aspect of it and different reasons for it. And I was most amazed at how peaceful everybody looked.
And actually, Michelle's been showing me, the Callahallen dog. I can't. There we go. We've got a dog. We've got dogs in bogs in Denmark.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So in other words, Michelle unwittingly linked a bit of evidence from South Uist, the Hebridean Islands, to bog dogs. Yeah. Bog dogs. Well done, Michelle. Thank you for that. Right. So anything else, Anne, or go on to Del? Yeah.
Nope, fine. I've got to go now.
The only thing that I've heard.
Hang on, and 1 second. Del's got to go, so we'll see you. We'll see you on Saturday, hopefully, Del. If not, on Wednesday.
Hopefully, yes.
Thank you, Del.
Okay. Bye, all.
Bye, Del.
Bye.
Bye, Del. Right. So, Anne, what would you like to say quickly?
Oh, it was only that I've heard of the triple fold death. It's either in alchemy or something arcane, like the Freemasons and that sort of thing. Is some sort of ritual.
Lots of roots, but we're obsessed with this word ritual. It doesn't need to be ritual. It could be lots of other reasons.
No, I'm just saying that. Yeah. Well, have they got it from the past, or have they got it? They've just made it up, But obviously, 3 methods of dying, killing someone is quite extreme.
Actually,
the dead.
Hang on, not that at all. We'll ask Pat a second. Not basically hung, drawing, and quartering. That was extreme as well. Pat, what about you, Pat?
Yes. Well, preservation was amazing.
It was. Yes.
They were just there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It
is great. It is great, Pat. It really is. It really is. And Henri, have we done you yet?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Then what? Go on.
I'll do something afterwards. I'll talk to you afterwards.
Okay. So what I'm going to say, have you all enjoyed today?
Yes. Thank you.
Very good.
Right. Thank you very much. I'll see you all soon. Well, obviously anyone who wants to stay behind can do. We'll work that out in a moment, because I know Anne wants to talk to me. Well, Henri will have a chat. So what I'm going to say is thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it, and I'll see you all soon. I'm glad you've all enjoyed it. If there's no other questions, those that need to go now, I'll see you soon, and look after yourselves.
Bye, Anne.
Bye, Alice.
Bye,
Pat.
Bye, Pat.
Bye-bye.
And Alice. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Pat and Alice. So
now I can phone you up if you like and talk to you in, about the library. That's what I'm going to talk to you about. Just 2 books, really.
Oh, okay, okay. And what I'll do, I'll phone you back. I'll phone you back. I'll have a word with Henri then.
Okay then. Bye.
Bye, Anne.
Bye.
Look
Bye,
after
Anne.
yourself.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
See
I'm
you.
just gonna mute now.
Oh God.
No, it was just a few things to layer in. I mean, when I was a lot younger, I met a chap who was a friend of the family in Ireland. He was an RTE cameraman, and one of his hobbies was actually is bog diving. So basically,
Bog
but they'd wear the full not snorkels. They'd wear the acrylung and everything because the water areas were quite deep, and the only way to find anything would be you'd hand search and just go across the bottom of the bog.
Yeah.
And he pulled out. He picked up something. He thought it was a bit of a bed, you know, someone had thrown in the bog. Got out the other end of the bog, pulled it out. He had a 1 foot long Bronze Age spearhead.
Oh wow!
So when I was there, he only lived around the corner from our house in Ireland. So we went round and saw him. He'd obviously not disclosed this to the museum at all. This is where the story gets a bit more interesting. But he had this in the house. So there we are. We've got, you know, 1 foot long, hefty piece of bronze spearhead, which they assumed had been hurled at probably a deer at the time. They'd gone into the bog, and you know, the guy lost his spear.
Yeah.
So this was back in the 1980s.
Oh God.
I went to Dublin Museum with my wife and kids, which is I think is a really impressive museum to go and see.
Yeah.
And we saw one of our gentlemen here, the bogmen as well. And in the cabinet, there was the same spearhead that actually had found by undisclosed person, because the story goes, he tried to take it to America to have it sold.
Oh, he knew it was valuable, and the bastard.
Yeah, and what happened, he got caught at Shannon Airport by the Gardaí. So he had two choices. If you keep it, you go to prison. If you give it to us, we say goodbye.
Anonymous as well.
Yeah. So it's actually in the National Museum in its own cabinet, and it is a really impressive piece of bronze spearhead.
Yeah, it sounds it. It does sound it.
But my cousin, who I don't know very much about actually, he used to be the Director General of the National Irish Museum, but he retired about 5-6 years ago.
Hang on a minute. I remember listening to an interview about him on the radio. He was it was quite a political.
Very Irish. The whole family is very much steeped in being Republican and only speaking in Irish but extremely intelligent. I mean, the whole family. I mean, one cousin I knew very well. He was a lawyer, and he was, I mean, brains. I don't know where they're gone from, but they had the whole countries, and literally the four of them, I think, in the family. But they were just totally OTT. They didn't live normal lives anyway.
Yeah, a bit like mine. So right. So anything else you want to ask me?
No, that I thought that was really good. It was very well put together. I thought the chemical analysis side was very good, because that explained, you know, why they still exist, and they will still keep coming up.
Yes.
In Ireland now, I think they're stopping the cutting of the bog because of the chemical greenhouse gas impact. So that's all. I think that's all going to be stopped.
Yeah.
So whether they're going to find any more through machinery or not, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going to stop this recording a minute.